mean, more or less what we're saying is we're going to stay present with this feeling until it moves, as you said, until this energy moves. Okay, I stayed versus, of all these ways in which we're trying to get out of the present because it's initially uncomfortable. It doesn't feel, and for many, maybe for many men, it's a new thing to stay with a feeling that
when culturally we're not really taught that we can do that, right?
Yeah,
you need to man up and just stuff it.
Yeah,
is the message
totally.
I think we're taught. As sons of God, men have so much capacity for good, joy, and happiness, but far too often they're depressed, disconnected, and unfulfilled. Man Talk for Latter-day Saints is dedicated to creating conversations with Latter-day Saint men about the things that are critical to men becoming their best selves, including spiritual, mental, and emotional well-being. Men need other men to help them become healthy, grounded, confident men. And our intent is to help Latter-day Saint men become the men God has created us to be. Hi, and welcome to Man Talk for Latter-day Saints. I'm Matt Allred. I'm on the board of One Heart, One Light, a nonprofit organization that teaches skills to help people with Latter-day Saint background process their emotions in healthy ways, rewriting limiting beliefs, and access the power of Christ's atonement in real time.
Hi, everyone. This is Bob Smith. I'm the LDS men's coach, and I'm on a mission to create strong, connected, happy families and societies in our world. And I believe firmly that starts with powerful, loving, purpose-driven husbands, men, and father. And so my goal and my mission is to help men become the creators that they were meant to be.
And I'm Dan Chambers, grateful to be here. I'm a master coach, teacher, and the owner of Unlimited Soul Coaching. I teach men and women how to expand their agency, connect more deeply to their identity, and create a life they love.
Great. Today we are talking about shame, and specifically, I'm calling it pervasive and pernicious shame. Shame is the first lesson the adversary taught Adam and Eve when they partook of the forbidden fruit. Essentially, the message was, hide. You are no longer good enough for God's presence. He doesn't want to see you because of what you have done. You are no longer worthy of his love. And shame is a lie. And yet, we as humans have all bought into this lie in some ways. Shame leads us to hide our true selves, our true intent. And for me, the subconscious message has been, if they know the real you, they will not love you or accept you. Often as parents or teachers, it's easy to use shame to control behavior. And sadly, much of that is done without consciously being aware of what we're doing. So it's not surprising then that in David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, he says that the emotion of shame is the closest of all emotions to death. It has the lowest vibration. And if you've ever felt really ashamed, you've tasted what that feels like. Brene Brown, the famous shame researcher, says that shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. Shame says, I am bad. But guilt says, I did something bad. So Bob and Dan, how have these things shown up in the lives, your lives, and in the lives of your clients? And what are the key things that we can learn to be able to combat shame?
Here's what's interesting for me is I didn't even realize I had shame. I didn't even realize it was there, and it was there for such a long, huge part of my life. And to be honest with you, I still have absolutely still have moments where I have some thoughts of embarrassment or not good enough, or, what if I can't? But yeah, for so many years of my life, I think the way that I covered that up was, let me put on this shield of perfectionism so that I could protect myself. So I thought I was really being protective, but what is really stopping me from, which is going back to another Brene Brown quote that you'll probably recognize, is what it really stops us is from being seen for who we are, for what we are, where we are, and being available to be connected with other human beings. So sometimes I'll go back to this, but I went through a divorce process several years ago, but I just remember my ex-spouse, which I didn't love at the time, and maybe we've talked about it before, but she would call me shell guy. So she would say, you're the shell guy, like you're going into this shell where you're just like not available. And I didn't really know what that meant because I wasn't even in tune enough with my mind and my heart and my spirit and my soul to recognize that I was really kind of walling myself off from connection with other people and connection with myself. And then I would go under the guise of, well, I'm just going to go keep plugging away at my callings. I'm going to read my scriptures more. I'm going to, pray harder. I'm going to fast more. I'm going to go to the temple more often. I mean, I've listened to, thousands and thousands of general conference talks. I can quote scriptures with the best of them. And I still didn't feel like I was good enough. It was almost like I was trying to outrun that feeling that I didn't even recognize as shame. And I don't know if that resonates with you guys or not, but it seems,
Absolutely.
really clear to me now, in hindsight.
Yeah.
Yeah, what comes to my mind from my experience, and I really appreciate your insights, Bob, as far as developing awareness. How do we learn to see what essentially is hidden, or we've created some way in which it's hidden? And it's interesting what I hear and what I notice in my own life. There's a dramatic difference, probably 180-degree difference between going through the motions of righteousness and actually experiencing connection with God. And to me, that's the difference between knowing that did the sun come up today? Well, yeah, it did. I'm sure it did. Like, yeah, I don't question that. That difference between like going outside and feeling the literal warmth of the sun on your skin. Like, to me, the process through which I think has helped me transform my life and move out of I guess I'll say it helps me identify when I'm choosing shame or experiencing shame more easily, because it's not gone from my life. But I'm more able to identify it because I'm choosing light, a real authentic experience with light daily. And that to me has been so helpful to kind of to process through my own experience. So what do you guys think?
No, I think that's beautiful. I love the way you said, and I'll probably get it wrong here, but you said the actions of righteousness, or kind of like checking the box and showing up. That really resonated with me because I know I've done that. Showing up to service projects and not that that's wrong, but if I'm doing that as if, oh, hey, this is the real me, but I'm really unable to connect with the real me and unable to show up as the real me, then I'm just using that in shame, trying to hide who I really am. And I know I've done that a lot of times, but to your point, knowing God is different from knowing, from just checking the box. And I guess where I'm going with that is to me, it's critical that I connect with the real me and that I learn to love and accept me, even in my weakness. And that's where I think where I was getting stuck in shame was, no, I have to show up and be perfect. Kind of like you said, Bob, I have to prove myself, or I can't show up. I've got to hide in my shell or hide in my cave and so for me, the big learning has been that I don't need to hide, that I can show up even warts and all, and I can love and accept who I am and not have to hide it from God or anyone else for that matter. Anyway, that's been a major shift for me.
Yeah. Do you guys remember the talk by Elder Uchtdorf, where he talked about either coveting a crown or a cave? Did that ring a bell to you guys?
I don't
Like
recall
where
that,
you covet a crown or you want to go to the cave? And so I guess what's come up for me with what you guys are saying is how could we tell? So I didn't know that this was there for me. And so how could we help others that would be listening to this kind of identify that, or to begin the process of identifying what's there for them, so that then they can start making the shifts, and hopefully sooner than I did. And maybe I needed to go through this kind of long, drawn out, somewhat painful process, but like, how could we help others kind of identify, this is what's going on? And so one thing for me is um, there's like this point of kind of exhaustion, meaning like there's a void here that I'm trying to fill with all the to-dos. And so that's where we go through the checklist, expecting that to cause us to feel differently about ourselves or to fix some perceived deficiency that we have inside of ourselves. Or the other part is we just want to check out altogether and say, forget it. I'm not going to do anything, totally demotivated and completely uninterested. So in one way, it's almost like one way this could show up, or at least that I've seen it for me, is like overexertion, if you will, and kind of exhaustion, but in the end, feeling still hollow and unfulfilled, or kind of giving up and saying, I'm not even going to try. It's not worth it. There's no point in even attempting this, because I'm still going to feel terrible about myself no matter how this goes. Yeah, do you guys have any thoughts about that, or anything that would be helpful to share with these guys that we're reaching out to about like how they could see it, recognize it,
Well, yeah, no,
initially?
and I appreciate you bringing it up, because what comes to mind is exactly, I know I've seen it in my own life and others, where I'm gonna run hard and I'm gonna be perfect. Well, this hasn't worked out. I'm not feeling as happy and as close and as connected. So I'm just gonna give up, right? Forget this. I'm gonna leave the church and break all the commandments. And and I know people who've done exactly that, trying to live this perfect standard, finally burned out, breakdown, and forget this. It's all false. I'm just going to run the other way as hard and fast as I can. Neither one of those is obviously the solution. To me, the solution has got to be a willingness to engage in the process. And, Dan, a minute ago, you were talking about, coming to know God. And I don't remember the exact verse, but what comes to mind is there's the verse in, I think it's 1 John, that says, ye shall, it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but when we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And every time I hear that, what strikes me is I cannot come to know Christ until I come to know myself. And I can't come to know myself until I'm willing to dig into the shame. I'm willing to look at my weakness, as Ether 12:27 says. I have to be willing to see, okay, what am I really hiding from? And is that darkness really part of me? And can I love myself even though I'm tempted by all manner of temptations and weakness and all these things that plague me? So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's what came to mind.
Yeah. Dan, what do you think, man?
I love your question, Bob. So yeah, how does this become applicable? How can someone listening to this actually pull something away that benefits them? And my journey, and again, I don't know that this is everybody's journey, but my journey has been, just as I kind of alluded to, how do I literally experience light? How do I step into light? Because if I'm trying to just get rid of shame, to me, that doesn't work. If that's my motive, if I notice, I have shame, what am I doing? I'm trying to get rid of it. That doesn't work for me. But if I instead give my attention to light and God, and specifically the type of light that shines, as you alluded to, Matt, that shines on me and allows me to begin to see myself differently. To me, that's the light of Christ, as well as the power of God that illuminates and invites me to see myself differently. So how does a man do that consistently, daily, especially when we have to, like we've mentioned, it's almost like you have to begin to separate these to me, it's a paradigm shift is maybe how I'm thinking about it. Because it moves, there's plenty of individuals who maybe we're all in this boat. Oh, we all read our scriptures. We all said our prayers and, went to the temple, read Jehovah's Witnesses. So it's like the acts of righteousness were in our lives, and yet we still felt empty or unworthy and that was normal, even though we're doing those things. So how do you shift? How does that shift happen? Where now those acts of righteousness actually have meaning, purpose, and substance. They actually illuminate our souls. They give us life and light so that we can begin to stand in the presence of God with confidence, right? That we can actually begin to feel distilled upon us line upon line, strength to be who we are, even though we're simultaneously weak still. It's not that we've mastered anything, but there's this, I think, so when I think about, so how does that happen? How does that shift occur? It's something that we've already discussed a little bit, but for me, it has to do with the paradigm that works better for me than how am I being obedient. But the paradigm that works better is just relationships. Like, how is my relationship with myself and with Jesus Christ and with Heavenly Father? And I like to think about and invest in those in positive ways. So I realize that there's a lot of maybe practices or tactical things that you could say, well, because what does that mean? But to me, just to speak about it in a broad sense, to me, the fundamental shift to help me move away from some of this was to think more about real relationships with myself, with Christ, and with Heavenly Father, and then working to cultivate those in real ways. If it didn't fill me up, then I would pause and stop and wait and go, wait a sec, this isn't working. What works? You have to find what actually works, I think, to make that transition. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I love that. And I love how you mentioned relationship with our self as a true relationship, because I think that's really, at the basis of all of this. And also identifying what really is working and what isn't working. And that's really the power of kind of going really internal, having a coach, having a counselor, having somebody that has that perspective that can kind of help dig a little bit deeper into what's really there and what's really going on for you, so that we can kind of open that up. Just like Brene Brown says, shame is like mold and can only exist in the dark, like where it's covered up, concealed. And the only way to really eradicate that is to bring it out into the light, like your beautiful example of coming out into the sunlight. That's really the process of kind of uncovering. So I think at the root of this, at least for me, and I think for a lot of guys, and for a lot of the guys that I coach, is, the thought of, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, there's something deficient in me, or there's something inherently wrong with me. So those are all some of the thoughts or common threads that I've seen that kind of revolve around shame, or that produce that sense of shame within us, like that there's something inherently wrong or deficient with me. And if I open up about that, or if I let it out too much, or if I'm really seen, then I won't be loved. I will be rejected. And that's too big and too scary to even approach. And so therefore we cover it up and conceal it and try to pretend like it doesn't exist. And then that's where the shame grows and it festers. And so some things that I and that's part of why, I created the group that I did, is because if shame can only exist in the dark, then the only way to really start the process of healing from that is to bring it out into the light. And what better way to do that than in a group of like-minded men in a judgment-free environment, where you can show up and say the thoughts that you didn't dare say, and share the feelings that you didn't dare share with anyone else, and be able to be okay in that experience, and in the sharing of it, that you think you might die by letting this out of your system, or saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had that thought, or I can't believe I'm feeling these things. I shouldn't be feeling these ways. I shouldn't be having these thoughts. They're in my head, and now I'm actually letting them out. And to still be embraced and loved for exactly who you are, that's where I think it's almost like retraining our brain to say, oh, I'm still okay. Like I've passed through this portal, and I survived it. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's,
Matt, your thoughts?
yeah. I mean, you're saying exactly what has largely been my journey, which is, until I went to a men's retreat and could step into a place that was, I didn't know such a place existed. It was mind blowing to know that not only could I be open, but and it was really modeled for me by others who could step in and be super vulnerable and just say, hey, here's my story. Here's who I am. And that to me was, for them to drop their walls like that, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I guess I can do the same. But then to have, I'll be a little vulnerable here, just that the first time a man was willing to hold space and just hear my story like that, I bawled. I cried, because I my story was, no one wants to hear me. And if they do hear me, they're going to reject me. And so it really challenged that shame, to just have that opportunity. After I'd kind of shared what I was going to share, all he said was, "I hear you." I'm like, oh my gosh, this is mind blowing to me. But what it allowed me to do was first start to be accepted by other men, which really led the path for me to love and accept myself. And that was honestly the first time in my life I could feel like, oh, hey, I'm okay for me. I don't need to beat myself up, because I was really brutal with myself. Just, wanted to live up to every possible expectation in my own mind, and it was pretty rough with myself. So, no, it's been a huge shift and a huge learning for me to realize that not only did I need that space, but I think men traditionally, and I guess we talked a little bit before the show today, that I think traditionally men have had a space with other men. I mean, if you're one of the 2000 stripling warriors, or even, being a scout and you're hiking a mountain or something, you have this group of brothers, and you see your weakness in some ways, trip on the trail or you get shot by an arrow or whatever. It's like, hey, I'm in dire straits here. And to have that group of men rally around you, say, well, we're not going to let you die, right? We're going to do whatever it takes to save you. I think that's extremely healing. And there's a scripture that comes to mind, and I think I may have shared it, but when the Lord says it's not good for man to be alone, I don't think that's talking just about marriage. I think he's saying men don't ever need to be alone. They need a group of brothers, whether they're working, whether they're going to war, whether they're, doing a hobby. Men need that cohesion to learn how to be men, to challenge one another, to kick each other in the butt when we're not being accountable or living up to our potential. So I think there's a lot of value in that, Bob.
Yeah. Such a beautiful story, Matt. Thanks for sharing that too, man. I know that's been a massive, I mean, that must have been just an amazing experience to have, and such a healing one at that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Gosh. Yeah, it's amazing.
And I do think, so back to shame for just a second, I feel like shame is at the core of why men won't connect or don't connect. For example, I've got a friend who, I guess he's in the stake presidency now, but he was an elders quorum president a couple of years ago, and we were just talking about elders quorum activities. And he's like, I can't get anybody to come. They've got nothing to connect on. They've got no reason to be together. And I was like, hold on. We're members of the church. We got the priesthood. We got all these reasons to connect, but we can't get them to connect. And I've seen it in my, he's in a different ward, but I've seen it in my own ward. Why won't men connect? What is it that keeps them from being able to step into that place? And maybe the environment's not safe, right? Maybe they judge that, oh man, too much at risk. I can't be real there, or it's not safe for me to be real. I guess the question I'm asking, how can we invite men to find that space or create that space, or what does that look like? Any thoughts, Dan?
Well, I think there's principle and there's practice. And ultimately, really, there's doctrine undergirding this plan of salvation, right? This journey of mortality in which we are meant to feel these feelings. It's
Sure.
part of the journey. And I wonder if that's even part of what has to be understood, because as you alluded to, when men come together in groups where vulnerability is part of the undergird of that opportunity, it surprises men, but it also instantly feels like, oh, wow, this feels really good.
Yeah.
So I think part of the journey in mortality is to feel some of these things and then to make those choices that move us out of those feelings towards Christ is the best way I describe it. So I think there's individual things we do, as well as then we can also choose, which has all been a part of our experiences. All of us have been involved in group related things, which adds a powerful benefit. So what I would wonder, here's what I would want to say though. Group can be such a powerful facilitator and support, but it will not by itself change a man.
Sure.
So So I think it's a powerful benefit. But so I notice for me, I love to think about the individual and what the individual has to do. And maybe I don't want to say has to do, but there's some individual work here that's part of, like, salvation is this individual thing. Exaltation is it's the family event. So what kind of man, because what I've discovered I want to, regardless of any situation I'm in, be able to live in the light. And that's maybe how I like to think about it. So what does that look like? And so for me, this is one of the practices that I felt inspired to choose, and I choose it every day right now. And it is one that everyone's heard. It's popular, but as opposed to going through any motion relative to this idea, but to really experience it. Just this morning, I woke up and I noticed that I had some self-doubt about, and so maybe there was also some shame mingled in as I began my day, thinking about my business, thinking about some responsibilities I have, and wondering how I was doing and where I was at. But I have a commitment, and it is to begin the day with gratitude and to essentially talk with my Heavenly Father and begin to count my many blessings. And so there's part of me that wanted to ask for help really bad initially when I wanted to pray. It's like, oh, but I need some help with this. I can see I'm kind of struggling. But I kept my choice. I used my agency, kept my commitment to begin to count my blessings, or to begin to express gratitude. And as that event happened, as I walk, and this is on a walk, I do it every morning. I go on a walk first thing. And on that walk, I started to initially like, well, it's spring. I'm appreciating spring. It's a cloudy day. And I love and it's early. I'm out at like 5:15 in the morning. So the clouds are dark, but you're starting to get a little bit of sunrise. And I began to appreciate that. So essentially, I added gratitude to my life to my morning. And those feelings of doubt and shame just gently, like almost just slowly fade like frost. They melted off. I didn't have to confront them. I didn't have to go after them like, I've got to get rid of these. But I made a choice as an agent in something that honored me as an individual and kind of, in essence, helped me regain that identity of son of God, disciple of Christ, child of the covenant. I found my way back there by expressing gratitude. And that to me is just, so I guess that was one of the things I would throw out there and offer. I mean, it is something that we've all heard. It's something that gets talked about. But I feel that gratitude, because we talk about these, like you say, shame's way down here next to death.
Sure.
Gratitude's way up there next to,
Absolutely.
I think, eternal life. So a choice of gratitude, when we can actually experience gratitude, I think we can shift. And so to me, that's vital for me. That's super helpful for me to have that individual experience, in addition to then being with good men like you guys and others, that I feel that strength that comes from that. So it's not that one's better than the other, but I guess I'm expressing, I feel like men need both.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. So thank you. I mean, I was remembering a quote from, I think it's Joe Dispenza, saying something like, gratitude is the ultimate state of receivership. So you said, I thought to ask, but instead I expressed gratitude, and you received everything you wanted and more, but it wasn't going the ask route, it was going the gratitude route.
Yeah, exactly. And scripturally speaking, there's powerful scriptures if we really look at the words of the Savior.
Sure.
Even like like talking relative to it, like a celestial life, it's those that received a testimony of Christ. They didn't grab it. They didn't make it happen. They didn't figure it out. They received it. Mm-hmm. And the result of, like you say, that receivership is so, to me, that idea by itself has been incredible in helping me in the daily moments of guilt or shame or something happening, and or doubt or whatever these emotions are, knowing how to bring them into the light without having to like worry about them, but in essence, choose gratitude and notice how that invites that light into me.
I love that. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, Dan, I want to add to just a little bit of what you said, where you talked about those other feelings kind of melting away. And I couldn't agree with that more. And so just to share a little bit about my experience with coaching and the men that I coach and the work I've done, personally as well. So, and I also actually want to touch on that, combine that with the part that you said about being grateful for cloudy days. And and a little bit overcast and it's not perfectly sunny and shiny all the time. I think that really is illustrative of life in general. So, and what I mean by that is all of these feelings and emotions, these thoughts and emotions that we have on a, minute by minute, hour by hour, daily basis that go through our bodies. It's all part of the normal human experience. We were meant to experience shame. We will experience anger. We are going to feel disappointment. And guess what? We're also going to feel joy, and we're going to feel peace, and we're going to feel excitement, and we're going to feel all of these other parts of life. But all of it is part of one great whole in terms of helping us grow and develop to become the powerful creators that we were meant to become. And so part of the melting away, so there's kind of two parts. And this is a lot of what I help my guys with too, the men that I coach, is number one is, what is the thought that's creating the shame that then you act from that place, and then what's that creating for you? And so the thought many times, like I mentioned earlier, is I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm deficient in some way, something along those lines that says, that then feels like shame inside of our bodies. So that's one aspect of it. But then the other aspect of this too, which is like another layer of this work, is when shame comes into when shame is there, when you feel shame, or when you feel disappointment, or when you feel anger, or when you feel happy or sad or whatever it might be, what are you making it mean just by the presence of those thoughts and emotions in your life? So for instance, we've got the one part where it's, I feel this way, and then we try to understand that and pull that apart so that then we can make choice to say, oh, it's me that's creating this. I'm creating this. I'm not intending to create this, and nor are we not intended to not have all these experiences or emotions. But when those emotions show up, what are we making it mean by their very presence? Like when you feel shame, is that a problem or is that not a problem? Do I need to get rid of this as soon as possible? Do I need to stuff it down? Do I need to forget that it exists? When I feel angry, like many of us feel at various times. I went to a car dealership yesterday to try to test drive a car that I'm looking at buying. And I set up the appointment. I did it right yesterday morning. I had the appointment all set up, and we had it scheduled. I had the person. It was going to be right at 3 o'clock. I drove down there. I was there right at 3 o'clock, and I showed up all excited. And they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we just closed on a deal on selling this car just 2 minutes ago. Like the people went and test drove it, then came back and got their paperwork together and came back 2 minutes before I showed up. And then therefore I couldn't go test drive the car, even though it was like I took a special time off of work to go do this thing." I was so mad. I was so mad when I was there. My son looked at me and says, "Are you mad about that?" I'm like, "I am super mad about that." But if we're in the place of shame and like, hey, feelings and emotions are not okay, I would have said, no, no, I'm not mad about it. I don't really care. It's fine, whatever, cover it up, dismiss it, whatever. But I didn't. I was totally mad about the experience. And I could own that I was mad. And I knew that whatever thought I was thinking about that whole experience was what's causing me to be mad. But yet I still was mad about it. And I was okay being in the place. And so just to kind of help illustrate, it's totally okay to have these emotions that we have. And then when we have them, what I actually do, instead of like what I used to do, instead of suppressing them, because when we suppress the emotions that we don't like, we actually end up suppressing all the emotions that we want as well. You can't
True.
differentiate one from the other. Our body can't really do that. And so we ended up just having this kind of small little life of everything that's just kind of controlled and balled up inside of us to where we don't really feel anything anymore. But instead, what I do when I feel these emotions like sad or disappointment or shame or whatever it might be, I put my hand on my chest and I breathe into it and I speak it. I say, I feel shame right now, or I feel angry, or I feel unloved, or I feel disappointed or whatever it is that's real for you in the moment, and give it some voice. Notice where it is in my body, and then I actually breathe into it for 2 or 3 or 4 big deep breaths to allow it to expand instead of to try to shove it down. I allow it to expand and welcome it in, and then it's amazing how quickly that feeling kind of dissipates, and I'm okay, and it's okay, and it's okay that I felt that way, and I can totally handle it. And now, from a more powerful creative place, now I can decide at that point, now what do I want to do? How do I want to feel? What is that I want in the situation? What is that I want to create? And then what do I need to believe about this in order to create what it is that I want? And so that's a really beautiful, powerful way to say, it's not about, like Dan said, you don't have to eradicate this. You don't have to be afraid of this, even though that's so much of what we spend so much of our life doing, is trying to avoid rejection or avoid shame or avoid disappointment or avoid all of these feelings that we don't want to feel. And what I'm saying is, it's time to do the opposite of that. It's time to let them in, to feel them fully, and then to decide from that powerful place, saying, I know that I'm feeling this way. I own that I'm feeling this way. And I want to let it in and learn from it and treat it as a gift. And then I still have the ability to decide what I do next, and how I want to feel after that point.
I love the way you kind of model and show a safe way to not only express anger but to feel anger. I think I know myself for a long time. I was afraid to go into anger because what am I gonna do with it? Am I gonna hurt somebody? Am I gonna say something that I regret? But Dan, you had said earlier, we are here to experience all that life has to offer, including the unpleasant experiences and unpleasant emotions, because the scriptures say that we're here to taste the bitter so we can learn to prize the sweet. Well, I can't prize the sweet unless I taste both sides. And okay, I'm going to choose this. That to me is agency, and I have heard emotion referred to as energy in motion. So if I allow it to move through, like you showed, Bob, that's what a great way to do that. But if I stuff it, if I hide it, if I try to suppress it, well, guess what? It's going to be there next week and next month. And when somebody pokes that spot that triggers me, right? Who knows what's going to come out? And the more I've done that over the years and stuffed it in, the more that's just sitting there simmering, waiting for somebody to tip the lid, and boom, there it goes.
It's not only like it's actually the plan and mortality is designed so that gets poked, because
absolutely,
absolutely. So it's we that's the irony of it. And so what you just described, it's really not the irony. It's just that's how it works. So, like Bob, what you just described perfectly, it's like we receive it, because in it and versus resist it.
Sure.
And to me, like that's how my mind differentiates the experience. And those are the questions I have to ask myself. Oh, like, would I be willing to shift into receiving this? And like you mentioned, breathing with it is a powerful way to receive something, because it just presence. I mean, more or less what we're saying is we're going to stay present with this feeling until it moves, as you said, until this energy moves. Okay, I stayed, versus, of all these ways in which we're trying to get out of the present, because it's initially uncomfortable. It doesn't feel, and for many men, it's a new thing to stay with a feeling that, when
culturally we're not really taught that we can do that, right?
Yeah,
you need to man up and just stuff it. Is the message totally. I think we're taught.
So I love the example of just that pivot into receiving, and for me, or am I resisting and learning to notice? Like, am I resisting this feeling? And to me, like you were talking about, that's kind of like level 2 of this, because level 1 could be like, oh, I'm choosing this, or here's the thoughts that are happening. But level 2 is being able to just receive the whole moment versus resist it, and to begin to have your own experience in being an agent. Because to me, all of this has to do, shame has way less power in my life as I am more engaged as an agent in my life. Because it's like, oh, what am I choosing right now relative to this? Am I receiving it, feeling it, having my experience with it? Or am I essentially trying to hold it at bay and control it, right? Or run from it, or stuff it, or all these other, they're all the same thing said in 100 different ways, but we're trying to not stay present with what is. Sure. Because we're uncomfortable with it.
What,
But in
what I
the
hear
end,
you saying, both of you saying, is just becoming conscious of what am I choosing, what am I feeling, and what am I going to choose about that. And I mentioned this a minute ago, but Mosiah 3, is it 19, the natural man, in there it says willing to submit to all things, which to me, Dan, says willing to receive all
Yeah.
things that the Lord sees fit to inflict upon you. And the question that goes through my mind is, okay, what does he see fit to inflict? Well, it's everything. It's being present. It's everything that's in my life is what he's inflicting. Good, bad, favorable, unfavorable, painful, pleasurable. That's what he's giving me. Therefore, am I willing to submit to all things that he's seeing fit to inflict upon me as a child submit to his father? There's power there.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I could just go back to that car example for a minute, which is I was choosing to be mad in the moment. Like I could see it and I still chose it. Like I just want to be mad right now. I'm disappointed. I'm angry. Like I was all excited about doing this thing. And I'm just gonna totally own, and I'm gonna choose to stay in this space right now. But had I gone to the place of I shouldn't be angry, good Mormon men, good LDS men, don't stay angry. We never feel angry ever. Like that's just not something that exists in the church. If you're actually going to hold the priesthood and give blessings and heal people and participate in the sacrament service, and especially go to the temple, I mean, you should never experience anger, right? And that could not be further from the truth. Because if I was in the place of, like I have been in my life before, of I shouldn't be angry, I should just be okay, I should just be whatever, and be totally dismissive of the experience I was having inside of my body, that's where the true problem happens. And that's where we stay stuck. Like the fight and the turmoil that we don't want to be experiencing stays in our system. And because I was able to just own it and be totally okay with being mad, it processed through so much more quickly. And there was kind of a gift in all of it. And then my mind was able to open back up to be like, okay, now what do we do about this? I can't do anything to change that. And I can't, and I still want to, have this experience. I immediately shifted into, okay, let's see if we can find another place to go test drive the same car. And we did, and we had an amazing experience of it. But had I stayed there, you can see how it could have just been, let's just continue the misery for longer and longer and longer. And so I love the way Dan said it of, are we going to receive it or are we going to resist it? And what we resist persists. Like that's just a little rule of thumb for those. If you think you can just get rid of it, guess what? You can't. It will come back up, and it's gonna and the conflict will stay inside of you until you've really processed it and dealt with it in a way that is where you're open and accepting of really what is and of how you feel.
It's beautiful.
And as I say, another way that this was something that one of the coaches I worked with once said, like, oh, emotions, you just have to ride the wave. Your objective is ride the wave. It will come to shore. But when whatever shows up, just be with it and ride the wave. So, because I think what I heard you talking about, Bob, is right. Like what comes in a lot of times when we feel an emotion is it triggers perfectionism. I'm not supposed to feel this, right? Like that for some reason is that cultural, I don't know, scripted thought that wants to then show up. Oh, you need to be perfect right now. And perfect means this, right? So part of it is letting go of that. Part of it is being conscious of like perfection that's not the objective right now. Instead, what the objective is to be present in this moment and receive it, ride the wave, and stay intact as an agent so that you can continue, like you said, go on and have a great day.
It's beautiful. Yep. What I heard there too was, you use the word perfect, which I've learned to, really hate that word. But when the scriptures use it, I understand it's more like complete. And so I can't be complete until I receive everything. I taste the bitter and the sweet. And Bob, you said something a minute ago about there was a gift. And I believe that's always true, that the Savior's always got a gift. If you're willing to receive the bitter, well, boom, here's the sweet along with it. How can you receive the sweet unless you taste the bitter that he's given you to experience and learn from it. I think there's always a lesson and always learning in whatever he sees fit to inflict upon us.
Yeah. Yeah. That was really beautifully said. And who felt more of the weight of the world, right, than our Savior himself? And what a beautiful gift came from that, experience of him receiving the weight of all of that came upon him at that time. And I really believe that part of us receiving the weight, if you will, of these emotions, of the thoughts that come, because we can't even begin to try to control all of the thoughts and feelings that we have on any given day. We have tens of thousands of thoughts, most of which are not even conscious to are not even conscious to us. There's so much are in our subconscious mind. And so we can't even begin to try to control that. But what we can do is we can notice the emotions when they come and use the emotions as kind of like our gauge as to where we are and what we are believing about any given situation that we're in at the moment, whether it's an interaction with our wife, with our kids, whether we're trying to build a business, whether we're trying to, go test drive a car, whether we're interacting with our parents, whether we're doing whatever. And so, yeah, it's such a gift to just, be present, be in the moment, and allow all of those things to be with us.
Beautiful. So I know we're getting close to our time. So I'm just going to ask each of you, what's one thing you'd give a thought, something to our listeners as we wrap up?
Dan, you want to start?
Sure. I like easy and I like simple. So like where I started today, like I like to go back to relationship. And I think that what I feel like my experience has been through feeling the bitter and the sweet is about becoming acquainted with Jesus Christ. There's an acquaintance I can have with him by feeling both the bitter and the sweet. And so in the bitter moments or the doubtful moments or whatever those moments might be, I have appreciated coming to understand that really can equal, it's not a problem, like it is a path. And that path isn't just something I'm walking on. It's an actual literal relationship with Jesus Christ and an acquaintance with him that allows me, because built into this idea of receiving, for me to receive, what undergirds receiving for me is that I choose to trust. So how do I trust these moments of my life? Or I guess I would say like this, I've learned that I can trust, it's easier for me to trust and stay present in the moments of my life as I've thought about, well, it's because I know Christ even more. These experiences acquaint me with him in such a way that it feels to me like, oh, it's okay for me to stay and ride this wave, feel these feels, and it's all okay. And part of it's because he's got me. It's like, oh yeah, I trust in him, not in me. So making that I don't know what to say, that shift, I guess, is a big part of this for me. And so I guess I'd toss that out, that I think this journey, the relationship with Christ is to me the key in all of this, and becoming acquainted with him, receiving him, trusting him is I think for me, that's been one of the keys.
Awesome. Thank you. What you got now?
Yeah. What I'd like to share is, so we started this discussion based on shame, right? So the first thing I would just share in closing is every emotion, there's a gift with every emotion. Every emotion has a gift with it. Whether we can see it or not, every emotion has a gift behind it. And then secondly, when it comes to shame, is those thoughts of I'm deficient, not good enough, defective in some way, and I can't, let anybody know that. Therefore, I've got to hide, this part of me, and however we go about hiding, whether it's works or literal pulling away and hiding. I just want the men to know that you are absolutely not defective or deficient in any way, regardless of what you've done in the past or what you think you've done or haven't done or should have done or whatever else. You absolutely are not. Those are just thoughts that you've been practicing over time that are creating this experience for you. And by inviting you into the light, like Dan was talking about earlier, come forward into the light, to be seen, to be heard, to allow those things to come forth and to begin your healing process, because it'll change the entire course of your life for the better when you do.
Beautiful. Thank you. So what really resonates with me as we wrap this up is something that I learned, I don't know, it's probably been 10 years ago, but for me, it was a big shift because I was in a place of trying to be perfect and trying to control and trying to, control thoughts and emotions and everything. And I remember reading this book, and what it emphasized was the importance of the word willingness and saying, I am willing. And that was a huge eye-opening and even mind-opening experience to realize not only is there power in that word, that's what we covenant at the sacrament. We're willing to take upon us the name of Christ. And and so, willing to submit to all things. And so I started just in my daily practice, whether it was silent or out loud, Lord, I'm willing, even if I can't begin to believe yet, or choose yet, or really exercise my agency, I'm willing. And that just opened up my heart. It opened up me to be able to learn greater things. So that's my invitation to whoever's listening, is start by being willing to receive. I'm willing to see. I'm willing to feel, willing to connect. There's a lot of power in just being willing. So thank you again for being here today, Bob and Dan. Appreciate it. And until next time, thank you for listening to Man Talk for Latter-day Saints. Please keep listening and subscribe to be notified of new content. At Man Talk, we are talking about the things that matter and that make a difference in the lives of men. If there's something you want us to talk about, please let us know.